What's up everybody, Josiah here. Today we've got a cool video. We've got two parts to this one. So this is part one, and part one is about chord variations. Part two is going to be about strumming variations. We're going to do some really cool stuff with this. So, stay tuned. And we're back. So, first thing we're getting started with is chords. Now, a lot of early on guitar players run into this struggle, and what happens is you guys are first faced with, okay, I get my first grouping of chords. I got an E minor, I got a D chord, a G, a C. Now, you've got to, say you got a good repertoire, like 15, 20, even 30 chords is pretty good. And maybe you know bar chords as well, and you're like, get that minor bar chord. Say you got all that stuff going on, great. What this is designed for is to give you lots of that chord variation, much more color behind your music, and it makes it to where you don't have to do bar chords. Yay! In my opinion, bar chords are, although helpful when it comes to visualizing the fretboard and seeing music theory, not as beneficial for being real creative with your music. Because this A, cool, we got an A, but there's like 30 different A's you could play. You can do a nifty little, some cool sounds behind it. But so we're going to get right around to that. This whole first phase, we're just talking about variations. Variations means that it can be a similar chord, but it's not exactly the same. So there's going to be some differences. There's going to be some alternative names that you can use. For instance, when we get to the E major chords, now notice I've got this starting on E, and I go all the way up the fretboard in all the positions you can play. Sometimes I mention you should have a capo. You guys know what a capo is? It's that little thing. If I play a G here, if I capo on 2 or 3, let's say, I can now play the same G chord, but it's just on a slightly different fret. Now, these are not all the versions. I try to give you guys a good set of new versions to play, but it's not all of them. Obviously, if you understand theory and intervals, you can do hundreds of different versions of the same chord. But in this case, we're doing some cool variations and supplemental chords that you can play instead of your original grouping. So the first chord that's on there is E. Now, this is the original E we know. It's just that guy right down. Now, if you're watching this on Patreon, you guys have the PDF that you can use with it. By the way, to all of you on Patreon, hey. And if you guys do want to do this on Patreon, send me a couple of your own variations. I think it would be really cool to see that. But going through here, the E chord, that's our standard chord. Now notice I go to another one. It's an E5. So an E5 basically means it's just an E chord with only the 5th. There's no 3rd. It's kind of a cool sounding chord. May have to be a little bit out of tune. Then our next one here, we have an E add 9, which is right here. It's got a lot of beautiful color to it. And if you also notice on Patreon, you guys have the names of the notes and the numbers of each chord is below. We have another E5 all the way up here. And we have an E major 7 up here as well. So these are just a few variations. I tried to use a few that I use very often, and they're pretty great. So we go to E minor next, which is, you can do it like that. I have an E minor 7. We have another version of an E minor 7. And we have an E minor 9, another very common one that I like to do. We can use this version. The minor 9th is one of my favorite chords. We have another one up here on, I believe this one was up here. We can do another one even all the way up here. Again, very cool variations to these chords. They have so much more color than just, that one's cool, but up here, it's got so much more color to the chord, and that's what I love about these. So we're going to move on to our next grouping of them right now. Okay, now F major, and also with like the F minor. F minor is pretty simple. Play the E minor chords, and you just play them there as a minor. Now there's some other ones, by the way, that I've got some simpler variations. For instance, the F sharp major. Instead of doing a bar chord here, I do give this recommendation. That's one of my recommendations. You don't have a whole lot of open strings, but it's an F sharp 11, but that's besides the point. Continuing on, for instance, we've got with the F major, we have a bar chord here, but I talk about using your thumb, makes it an F major 7. We have an F major 9, or better known as, what would that be, F2 chord. And then we have an F major 7, or excuse me, a B flat over an F major 7, which is kind of a nifty version of a chord here. We get this. And we can even hit that first string. I love the sound of that chord. It's beautiful. So lots of different versions. Now here's where we get it with that F minor, capo on the first fret, and we just play the E minor chorus. And all that fun stuff. You can get this guy up here. So as far as we go with all these different chords, now I'm not going through all of them right now. For you guys on Patreon, you have them all the way up from E all the way up to a D sharp. So even right in here, I'm looking at them here. We've got all these, some of the ones with the capo, all the way up to C, C all the way up to D sharp and D sharp minor, which those are basically the D and D minor chord shapes just played on the with the capo on the first fret. So I try not to take the capo up higher. Of course, there's plenty of stuff, you know, put the capo second fret, now you play the G chords and you're playing in the key of A. We got some really cool sounds, and you can do a lot of that. Yeah, with the capo here, we can keep moving it up, and I can play other chords in these keys. So a C chord with capo on 5 is an F. So I can do an F major 7 up here. Now, for those of you on Patreon, I do have another video coming very soon, and it's going in depth about how to play various different keys with capos. That's going to be on the full tier lessons. So if you're watching this one, this one here is for the mid tier. This is the one $10 a month, and you guys have access to tons of beginner videos, lots of intro things, as well as full PDFs, etc. So from here, this is part 1. It's talking about the chords and creating these variations in the chords, or looking at different versions of the chords. Part 2 here is going to be looking at variations in the strumming. So that part's going to be really awesome. We're going to be back and we'll be talking about that. I'll see you guys for part 2.